So, how do great powers really fall? Is it with some huge, dramatic bang, or is it more like a quiet whimper? Well, today, we're putting history under the microscope. We're going to conduct what you might call a seven-stage autopsy on the collapse of empires.
Right off the bat, let's challenge a big idea. You're probably picturing these epic final battles, right? Well, the source material for this explainer says forget it. The real cause of death for an empire, it's usually buried deep inside its ledger books.
So what this really means is that imperial collapse isn't some random lightning strike. It's not a sudden catastrophe. It's much more like a disease with clear diagnosable stages. It's an internal thing, a slow economic unraveling that, believe it or not, follows a surprisingly consistent script. And that's exactly what we're going to do here. We're going to conduct an autopsy. We're going to look past the obvious symptoms to uncover this seven-stage pattern of decline, a pattern that has popped up again and again from ancient Rome all the way to modern history.
Okay, so here's the roadmap for our little investigation. You'll see it starts with money problems, then it spirals into social breakdown, and it all ends in political failure. So let's trace this path together, starting with those very first cracks in the foundation. You know, just like any major illness, it doesn't just appear out of nowhere. It starts with these early, often really subtle, symptoms. And for empires, these first signs are almost always about money. They might seem manageable at first, but they are absolutely setting the stage for everything that comes next.
And check out how stage 1 just flows almost automatically into stage 2. An empire overreaches. Think of Great Britain trying to police a global territory it just couldn't afford anymore. So what does it do to pay for it? It goes into massive debt. We see the exact same thing with 16th century Spain, which kept going bankrupt to fund its wars abroad. It's a classic 1-2 punch.
So after that initial financial strain, the sickness, well, it doesn't stay contained in the Treasury Department. It spreads out into the streets. This is what you'd call the acute phase, where the problems become impossible to ignore and they start tearing society apart at the seams.
This is where that economic rot really starts to metastasize into a full-blown social crisis. People just lose trust in their institutions. A great example is that deep cynicism that totally crippled the late Soviet Union. And that distrust? It fuels this intense political polarization, where nobody can agree on anything. And then you get a massive wealth gap, which is a hallmark of pretty much every single late-stage empire in history. It just erodes any sense that we're all in this together.
All right, so now we're entering the final act. All those internal fights and the crazy economic pressures have hit a breaking point. These last two stages, they're basically the death spiral from which, historically speaking, there's been no coming back.
Yep, this is pretty much the end game. To cover all its debts, the state does something desperate. It just starts printing money. This, of course, crushes the value of the currency, just like it did in the Spanish Empire, and it leads directly to the final stage, default. The empire literally can't pay its bills or project power anymore. Authority just evaporates. And that final collapse, like we saw with the USSR, might look sudden from the outside, but really, it's just the inevitable end of this seven-stage process.
Okay, we've done the autopsy on empires of the past. Now for the really challenging part, using this historical model as a lens to look at what's happening right now. But remember, this is all about recognizing patterns, not trying to predict the future.
So when you look at this framework, you can't help but ask the question that the source material itself digs into. Where might the United States currently fit inside this seven-stage pattern?
All right, so based on the model we've just walked through, the analysis in our source material places the United States as showing many characteristics of stage 5. That's the one with loss of trust, political polarization, and a widening wealth gap. Now, this is presented as a diagnosis based on that historical pattern, just a data point in a very, very long historical trend.
So let's zoom out for a second. What's the ultimate takeaway from all of this? I mean, beyond diagnosing any one country, what does this whole model of imperial collapse really teach us about the patterns of history and power?
Let's boil it all down. First, and this is huge, imperial decline is an inside job. It's driven by economics. Second, that path of decline follows a shockingly predictable script. And third, remember, this model is not a crystal ball. It's a lens. Its real power is in helping us recognize the historical forces that are shaping our world today.
And that really leaves us with one final, big question to chew on. When we see these patterns laid out so clearly, echoing across centuries, is history a map showing us a destination we can't avoid? Or is it a warning, offering us a chance to read the signs and maybe, just maybe, choose a different path?